Hey everybody, how's it going? Wink here from Shattered Order Podcast to talk to you about some Imperial Troopers. Imperial Troopers are actually kind of fun in this game. Long-standing Night Sister killer, and of course just a pretty good Grand Arena Championship team. This team that, everything I'm about to talk about, I've talked about previously on the podcast multiple times. It's a team that I find very fascinating just for the fact that you can kind of set up a turn order and, you can kind of play with it and make it run almost perfectly, which is a hell of a lot of fun. Of course, depending on what you try to kill with it, may or may not work, but the teams that it is really good at, a lot of people use it for killing boss bounty hunters, which can be very frustrating. Night Sisters, Old Republic, any of those kind of frustrating teams, especially specifically ones that don't have days. If an AoE days will certainly eliminate what the Imperial Troopers like to do, but I'm going to talk about mods and, just kind of the way the team works as far as turn order and setting the team up, because there's a way you can set this up to make it incredibly efficient, especially against things like bounty hunters and Night Sisters. It's a hell of a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about kind of the main thing that makes the team work, and that is General Veers. That is his leader ability, in which Imperial Troopers have plus 20 speed and gain 10% turn meter when they gain a buff. That is very important. We'll come back to that here in a second. Now, with that out of the way, the first thing you want to do whenever you're building an Imperial Trooper squad is make Colonel Stark the fastest character on the team, because the speed at which he goes is basically when the rest of the team goes. So all your speed can be dumped on Stark, and then we will progress through the characters and show you the turn order and the specific speeds that they need to be as we kind of run through this process of setting them up. So here with Colonel Stark, you're going to want to put a lot of speed on him and some potency if you can, because potency is actually kind of important if you have his Zeta. There are kind of two different ways to calculate this, and they will give you different amounts of room to get your team going in. The Zeta actually opens the window pretty wide for everyone else to have even slower mods, but still for the team to work really efficiently. And his Zeta ability removes 1% turn meter from all enemies for each active Empire ally, doubled for Imperial Troopers. So that means 10% turn meter reduction at the end of his turn, which is kind of awesome. So the first ability that you're going to want to use whenever you use Stark will be his first special, Scan All Wavelengths. Empire allies gain crit chance up and crit damage up for 3 turns. Colonel Stark gains 5% turn meter for each Empire ally and each rebel enemy. So this means that on this ability, he will gain 25% turn meter. That will be important. So immediately after using this ability, he's already 25% of the way to his next turn, which we will come back to. Next thing that is really important here is crit damage up. Crit damage up actually drastically changes the way you want to mod these characters, especially your damage dealers, specifically Snow Trooper and Death Trooper. So Snow Trooper has a pretty cool unique ability that gives Imperial Trooper allies plus 20% critical damage. So this essentially means from the very beginning, your Imperial Trooper allies have plus 70% critical damage. Now, this actually means that you are going to want to mod with an offense set and not a crit damage set. An offense set will give you more damage output, which I will explain here in a second. But because Colonel Stark gives those 2 buffs, going back to Veer's leader ability, all Imperial Trooper allies will gain 20% turn meter. So if you take the speed of Colonel Stark, and for this example, I'm going to use a Colonel Stark that is, say, 300 speed. So he will effectively be 320 speed with the leader ability from Veers. You will multiply that by 0.8, which is essentially the turn meter that needs to be filled, because we're removing the 0.2, which is the 20% turn meter that they gain from the buffs that Colonel Stark gives. And so we will do that 320 times 0.8, and that will give us 256. Now, at that 256, that is the speed. At or above that speed, an Imperial Trooper ally will have full turn meter, 100% turn meter, and almost be guaranteed to go next. and that is going to be the speed threshold. That's kind of important. Now we're going to subtract 20 off of that because of the leader ability. You want to remove that back. So that essentially means that the second character in line, who is going to be Death Trooper, you're going to want him to be 236 or higher. He can be as high as you want him to be, but he needs to be at least 236 for this example. And if he's above that, he will go immediately after Stark, and you will use his Death Trooper grenade. This is the AoE that increases the cooldowns for anyone who is not buffed. And this is really important, especially against like Night Sisters, who the two primary ones that you have to worry about, Asajj Ventress and Mother Talzin, you don't really have to worry about them causing much of trouble on that first turn because their cooldowns are going to be increased by Death Trooper's grenade. Now, as for modding on Death Trooper, we already talked about his speed. But one other thing I do want to mention about Colonel Stark is if you have that Zeta ability, you can then take that 256 speed and divide it by 1.1. And that is effectively taking into account the 10% turn meter reduction that he does at the end of his turn. And whenever you do that, you will get 232.7, and you'll want to subtract the 20 speed. So at that point, the speed threshold becomes basically 213. If you're 213 or faster, you will be the next to go in line. You won't necessarily have 100% turn meter, but you should go before any other enemy character because they've had the 10% turn meter reduced. And the other team's speed doesn't really matter because that is basically assuming an enemy was the same speed as Colonel Stark, which is unlikely. All right, so the next thing about Death Trooper are his mods. So for damage output, because of that plus 70% critical damage, you're gonna want to mod him with an offense set. Yes, that does actually produce more damage on a critical hit than a crit damage set does. With the setup that I have with an offense set, 2 offense primaries, and these are 6 dot. That is what I calculate for the example I'm using. 2 8.5% offense primaries, along with a 42% critical damage primary, you'll actually do about 1.25 to 1.5% more damage, even on a critical hit, with this setup than if I had a crit damage set instead of the offense set. And on a non-crit, you'll be doing about 13% more damage. So you have a little bit more upside on the high end, but way more upside if you do not crit. So that does actually mitigate the downsides in a pretty substantial way. This same thing applies to Snowtrooper. Snowtrooper, you're probably going to run with 3 offense primaries, so it's not going to be quite as high of a percentage difference, but you still want to go with the offense set, 3 offense primaries, and the crit damage primary, and you'll be in a really good spot. So that is basically what we're going to do there. Protection. You prefer protection, but the biggest thing is you want to make sure Death Trooper is above that speed threshold that he needs to be at. Now, if we look at that speed threshold in this example, the 236 speed, we are going to want the next trooper in range trooper to be 1 speed slower than that. So essentially 235 in this example. Modding on a range trooper honestly doesn't matter too much. You just kind of want him to hang around because he gives really awesome buffs. So you could mod him with offense, you can mod him with crit damage, you can mod him with health, you can mod him with speed, whatever. It's more important to get him to the proper speed so that, the chain doesn't break turn meter. So the first thing that he will do is his special ability that gives, gives the protection, protection up and retribution. That is 2 buffs, so everyone's going to gain 20% turn meter there. So at this point, Colonel Stark will be at 45% turn meter. And Range Trooper will do his thing, and then 1 speed slower, and I do mean literally 1 speed slower, if you can do it, will be General Veers. And Veers has his Ruthless Assault. Now, this is where things get kind of interesting, because if you're able to take out a zombie or really anyone with this ability, you end up in a fantastic spot. So this is the AoE that calls everybody into attack, and with this setup, this whole team is effectively going, at the 317 to 318 mark roughly. It's like Veers basically has that speed, even though you have him modded a lot slower. So this is a great opportunity to use a lot less speed and focus on a lot of other stats like survivability or damage output. And with Veers, whenever you kill someone with this ability, with Veers alive, you end up with this really cool effect in which whenever an enemy is defeated while Veers is active, Imperial Trooper allies gain offense up for 2 turns, gain 50% turn meter, and recover 10% protection. So, if you can use that mass attack to kill someone like Zombie, for example, that will be 50% turn meter for everybody. This, at this point, will get Snow Trooper to 100% turn meter. So, he will be full and ready to go. However, you also have Stark, who will be at 95% turn meter, except there is the offense up, which is another 10% turn meter. So this should get Snow Trooper and Stark both to full turn meter immediately after Veers goes if you're able to kill someone with that ability. And that is really important because Snow Trooper can then do his AoE, which is great, but Stark will then get to go and remove even more turn meter. This is a very quick succession of removing 20% turn meter from the enemy. Now, there are, of course, effects, especially with Night Sisters, where they do gain some turn meter from enemies dying and stuff, but that Zeta ability for Stark really kind of slows them down. I mean, like I said, total 20% turn meter reduction at this point, which is still extremely early in the match. So this creates a pretty big, opportunity for you to do some serious damage. And that also means that at this point, Death Trooper has gained the 60% turn meter from Veers and the 20% turn meter from range, so he's at 80% turn meter. So Death Trooper doesn't need much more to be up, and on Death Trooper's next turn, you will have the awesome Terminate ability. And this ability is absolutely key because it can prevent revives, and this is why you want him modded for a lot of damage output. If the character is debuffed, he will automatically crit, and that is, of course, pretty awesome. But the biggest thing is that revive prevention. And my Death Trooper is Relic 5. And let's go look at his damage, which is 6948 currently, almost 70% crit chance, 192% critical damage, not counting for the bonus 70% that he actually has in the battle. But I had Death Trooper hit Asajj Ventress for over 130,000. I mean, whenever you have numbers like that, you don't really have to worry about it. And that was a Relic Ventress that, I don't have to worry about, just terminating it. It's absolutely awesome. So that is basically the setup. At that point, you should be in a really good spot to be able to work on mowing people down, because that kill from Death Trooper should then give turn meter, a ton of turn meter to everybody else, and you should pretty much be on a train of rolling with turn meter and counters and all that sort of stuff. And like I said, that getting that turn order set correctly and getting those speeds as tight as you can is really important for creating consistency and just increasing the overall efficiency of your Imperial Troopers. So again, that the turn order would be Stark, Death Trooper, Range Trooper, Veers, and finally Snow Trooper. Speed doesn't really matter on Snow Trooper. You just want a ton of crit chance and a ton of crit damage. The reason you want a ton of crit chance is because for each critical hit scored, reduce the cooldown of this ability by 1. So he has the 15% crit chance from Veers, and then if you just load him up with an offense set, a crit chance set, a lot of offense, get him to pretty decent crit chance, especially if you get him relic, you'll be totally good on the crit chance. So you should be able to use that AoE basically every time, as long as it's a competitive match in any way, shape, or form. And this is just a great team for collecting a lot of banners. It's a hell of a lot of fun. I've been using it to kill Night Sisters forever, and I mean, even when my Imperial Troopers were all gear 12, as long as they went first, I mean, I could take out some Night Sisters with a couple relics on there, and at this point, I feel pretty safe going against a lot of Night Sister squads that I used to be that I wouldn't touch with my Imperial Troopers. But to me, the most, if you're thinking about relics here, the relic order would essentially be Stark and or Death Trooper. I think those two are the two critical ones. Stark for the speed, because you want to make sure you go before any Asajj, who can be pretty fast, and of course Night Sister Spirit. Death Trooper is the one that prevents the revives. I mean, that Terminate is absolutely crucial, so he's really important. And then third would be Snow Trooper. Range Trooper and Veers, I don't really see much need to actually relic except for survivability. Veers is kind of squishy. Mine's geared 12.5 and he's a little squishy. I might have to do something there at some point, but I'm super happy with the squad. It is a ton of fun, and I hope you guys actually found this helpful. Like I said, the turn order stuff that I kind of talked about, that is just absolutely crucial. Make yourself a Excel spreadsheet or whatever, kind of plug those numbers in and put those formulas in there, and it should just spit you out the that speed threshold that you kind of need to be over, and then just start subtracting one speed as you go down, from Death Trooper to Range Trooper to Veers, and that way you can ensure a really tight turn order and a lot of really nice efficiency there, with a ton of speed on Stark, and I think you're going to be pretty happy. So I hope you guys found this actually really informative and helpful. If you like the video, share it with your friends. We'd really appreciate it. Make sure you check out the podcast. Every week we live stream on Twitch. You can find us on any podcatcher app or whatever. Patreon.com/Shattered Order if you would like to support the show. If you found this helpful, we'd love it if you would do that, or even sub on Twitch. We would appreciate it. So hit that subscribe button and join our Discord, discord.me/Shattered Order, and we will catch you guys there. Later.